The next piece of advice I would add to asking good questions is sort of looking at the subcontext of the conversation. Just taking a step back and zooming out and observing yourself having a conversation with the hiring manager. Now, if you open LinkedIn or Twitter and start reading all these different posts on how to secure a job and how to show up and getting noticed by an employer or the hiring manager and standing out, sort of hovers around the idea of personalize your cover letter and resume to do your research, ask interesting questions, and all that advice is pretty good. I would say it's a great starting point if you're sort of lost and haven't been in the market for a long time. But there's some wisdom and advice that I have from personal experiences that is sort of uncommon, not shared. And I haven't seen pretty much anybody talking about it. So first, I'll add some points to the advice that already exists. For example, when they say do the research. So I wouldn't just stop at looking at their website or their social media. I would go into Glassdoor and look at what employees are saying, what their customers are saying about the company that you're applying to. And also, if possible, try the product, try and use it. So for example, if it's Spotify or Shopify, try building a store on Shopify, try using the product, get a sense of the experience, go into the community forums, read how customers are talking about that product. Now, this is not going to be possible in all instances, but as part of your research and showing up differently to the hiring manager and the company, you're going to come off as curious and genuinely interested in that company's service or product. So that's one more layer that I would add to the research phase. The next piece of advice I would add to asking good questions is sort of looking at the subcontext of the conversation. Just taking a step back and zooming out and observing yourself having a conversation with the hiring manager. Now, you're asking questions. These could be canned questions, and they might come off as a bit dry unless you're actually following the conversation and asking questions based on what the hiring manager is telling you. So the advice here that is sort of uncommon and very nuanced, and if you want to be a little bit more advanced, is you want to think about changing the dynamic of that conversation from, I need a job, please give me a job, to you're qualifying the company and having them convince you that you're the right fit. And how are you going to do that? So early in the conversation, when the hiring manager and whatever the committee is, they start asking you questions, say, oh, those are interesting questions. But just before I answer that, and that way, and by saying that, you can segue to you taking the lead and saying, oh, I was just curious. This is something I was reading on Glassdoor about some of the employees. This is what they were talking about. They really enjoy this thing that you do and something that you don't do. All you're trying to do is find a very subtle, innocuous way to shift the conversation from them asking you the questions to you leading and guiding the conversation and qualifying the company and changing the power dynamic in the room in that conversation. This alone is a confirmed job letter if it's the right fit. And then finally, let's say, everything goes well. And I know I'm skipping a whole bunch of nuanced points, but if you do have specific questions, leave them in the comments below. Aspect of negotiation. You're not just going to negotiate on your salary. Think about what are the things that are important to you. Is it maybe the amount of time off that you get, or, certain conferences and events that you want to be part of, or, a learning budget. So when you're thinking about negotiating with your future employer, everything is on the table. Negotiate every single aspect of the deal, and you want it to be a win-win. So the annual salary, bonus, commission, et cetera, are not the only metric, or the title. And of course, it's going to vary based on the job, the role, the location, and blah, blah, blah. So in a nutshell, the three things I would do in a job interview would be number one, when doing the research, go beyond just looking at social media and the website of a future employer. Read their customer reviews, look at employee reviews on Glassdoor. If possible, try and use the product. And when it comes to asking questions, think of yourself as an observer of the conversation. Try and shift the dynamic of the conversation where you're leading the conversation, qualifying the employer, and they're trying to convince you that you're the right fit. And that's basically the subtext of the conversation of who has the power in that conversation. And then finally, negotiate everything. If you have specific questions, leave them in the comments below. I will be happy to address them. And all the best.